Upon finding my husband's diary, a sense of disbelief settled over me, shadowed by confusion, hurt, and a pang of betrayal that I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just any diary, these were private, vulnerable thoughts he hadn't intended anyone to read. But now, my view of him and our marriage had irrevocably changed. It all began on a quiet evening. The house was still, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound punctuating the silence. I had been searching for an old notebook when, hidden beneath a stack of papers in the back of a drawer, I stumbled upon a small leather-bound journal. I recognized it immediately. I'd seen him write in it occasionally, though I'd never felt the need to pry. But something about that moment drew me in. I had the unsettling feeling that answers I hadn't known I'd been seeking lay within its pages. As I held it, I debated with myself for what felt like an eternity before curiosity won. Opening to the most recent pages, I felt my pulse quicken, each word unraveling secrets that made my heart sink. There it was, a confession of his attraction to a friend in our circle, hidden in plain ink. He described her in a way I'd never heard him describe anyone, certainly not me in recent years. He admired her humor, her charm, her confidence, qualities I thought he valued in me. His words felt like daggers, cutting through my assumptions about our relationship and what he truly thought of me. He described fleeting glances, small gestures, and shared jokes that felt more intimate than I'd ever perceived. As I read, it became painfully clear that his feelings were not mere admiration. He admitted to having a crush on her, his words laced with longing and an undertone of desire that I hadn't expected. I remembered our conversations about trust, about boundaries, and the confidence with which he always assured me that he valued our relationship above all. The thought of him feeling such a way towards someone we both knew unsettled me deeply. In one entry, he described an evening at a mutual friend's gathering. I remembered that night too, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the warmth of friends coming together. But what I didn't know was how differently he had perceived that evening. He recounted her looking at him in a way he thought suggested mutual interest. The idea that he had harbored this suspicion, that she might feel the same way, filled me with a mix of anger and shame. It was as if I had unknowingly stood on a stage, a quiet audience to an invisible play unfolding around me. What troubled me most was his final, contradictory conclusion. In his last entry, he reiterated that he wanted to stay committed to me. He hadn't acted on his feelings, which should have brought some comfort. Yet, the words felt hollow, especially in light of the other details he had meticulously recorded. This supposed conclusion didn't erase the fact that he had harbored these feelings, or that he had allowed himself to dwell on them. Then there was the lie. I remembered clearly the day I had asked him, half-jokingly, if he'd been checking her social media. I'd noticed small signs, his phone angled away when I entered the room, the slight tension when her name came up. My intuition whispered that something was off, but I brushed it aside, chalking it up to paranoia. I trusted him, after all, he was my husband, and we'd built a life together. But when he looked me in the eye and confidently denied it, I believed him. Now, with his admission before me, I felt foolish, like I'd been living in a blissful illusion while he wrestled with thoughts he never intended to share with me. What complicated things further was the nature of our friend group. We were all close, a tight-knit circle that felt more like family than just friends. The woman he wrote about was someone I considered a friend too, someone I admired and felt comfortable around. Now, every interaction with her would be tainted. I couldn't help but wonder if she'd sensed his attraction, if she'd been complicit in these quiet exchanges he described, or if she was completely unaware. Either way, our friendship would never be the same. As the days passed, I found myself scrutinizing my husband in a way I hadn't before. Every smile, every touch, every moment of eye contact felt laden with subtext I hadn't noticed before. Did he still feel this way? Was his attraction something he battled daily, a temptation lurking in the recesses of his mind while he lay beside me each night? These questions gnawed at me, creating a growing rift between us that I wasn't sure how to bridge. I thought about confrontation. Part of me wanted to demand answers, to lay bare his betrayal and demand accountability for the hurt he had caused. But another part of me hesitated, fearing that confrontation would do nothing but add fuel to an already smoldering fire. If I confronted him, I would be admitting that I had violated his privacy, that I had read words never meant for my eyes. And yet, how could I continue to hold this knowledge in silence, pretending that everything was normal? As the weight of my discovery settled over me, I found myself reevaluating our entire relationship. Were there other secrets, other lies he had chosen not to share? I replayed countless moments in my mind, searching for signs I might have missed. Every memory felt altered, like a photograph with the colors drained. The trust one had once held so dearly now felt fragile, like glass on the verge of shattering. In my more introspective moments, I wondered if I was overreacting. He hadn't acted on his feelings after all. He had ultimately chosen me, chosen to remain committed. But the thought felt like a weak bomb on a deep wound. The attraction itself wasn't what hurt the most. It was the secrecy, the lies, and the sense of betrayal. In his heart, he had allowed himself to stray, even if only in thought. That he could look me in the eye and deny it with such ease made me question not just his commitment, but the very foundation of our relationship. Over time, the pain didn't fade so much as settle into a kind of resigned ache. I found myself withdrawing emotionally, putting up walls I hadn't known I was capable of building. I began to create distance, protecting myself from a potential future betrayal. I didn't know if he noticed. Perhaps he did but chose not to comment. Our conversations became less intimate, our touches less tender. In some ways, it was easier this way, a self-imposed distance to shield myself from further hurt. Looking at him now, I see not just my husband but a man with hidden depths I hadn't fully understood. The diary had opened a window into a part of him I might never have seen otherwise. I realized that I would never truly know all the secrets, all the hidden corners of his mind. Perhaps that was the nature of relationships, to live alongside another person's mystery, choosing to trust despite the unknowns. In the end, I was left with a choice. I could confront him, lay everything bare, and risk a painful confrontation that might end with more lies or worse, irreparable damage. Or I could accept that he was flawed, that he was human, and try to rebuild the trust he had broken. Neither path felt easy or particularly satisfying, but that was the reality I now faced.